Hi everyone, in this video we will see nested loops in Python. If it is your first time to visit our channel, please do subscribe our channel. As part of the Python programming, we started control statements concept in lecture 25. In that we covered introduction part of the control statement and if statement. In the 26th lecture, we covered if else and if else statement. We discussed for loop with help of the examples. In the 28th lecture, we discussed while loop with help of the example. For loop and while loop, these two are looping statements in Python. In this lecture, we are going to cover nested loops concept. To understand this concept, you must have the knowledge about while loop and for loop. If you haven't watched that, please watch these two lectures to understand this concept. Before starts today's session, let us try to recall what have we covered in lecture 28. What is while loop? When do we use while loop? What is indefinite loop? What is infinite loop? After watching this video, you will get the knowledge about what is nested loop, execution procedure of nested loops, what is a nested for loop, what is a nested while loop. We are going to cover each and every point with help of the examples and with help of the coding. Don't skip the video, try to understand each and every point. If you are getting any doubts, please post your doubts in the comment section. So as part of the control statements, in the iterative statements, let us try to understand what is nested loop. Writing a loop within the another loop is called a nested loop. Then how to implement this? Already we discussed about two loops, while loop and for loop. So we can write any one loop within the any other loop. This concept is called nested loop. Then how to implement? Coming to the syntax, first we need to write one outer loop. Within the outer loop, we write inner loop and the statement or statements you want to execute as part of the inner loop. Then statements, these statements are part of the outer loop. See the indentation? For the inner loop, we are giving only single indentation. It means it is within the outer loop. And coming to the statements, we are giving two indentations. This is one indentation and this is another indentation. Two indentations it has. It means it is within the inner for loop. It has only one indentation. It means it is within the outer loop only, not within the inner loop. Then when do we use nested loops? Generally, this nested loops concept is used to work with multi-dimensional data, such as iterate over a matrix or nested list. Nothing but whenever you want to work with any matrix concept, like if you want to print elements of the matrix, or if you want to work with two-dimensional data, or if you want to work with arrays concept, two-dimensional array or a three-dimensional array, if you want to find sum of the matrices, product of the matrices, or if you want to print elements of the nested list, otherwise, or if you want to work with two lists simultaneously, in all these cases, generally we use nested loop concept. And also we can use the nested loops concept generating the patterns, such as star patterns. If you want to print star symbol in a particular pattern, or if you want to print your numbers in a particular pattern, in such cases generally we use nested loops. And if you want to generate a particular pattern of the numbers like Fibonacci sequence, in such cases also we use nested loop concept. Then what is a nested for loop? As we covered already, nested loop means we have one outer loop and one inner loop. Coming to the nested for loop concept, outer loop and inner loop, these two are for loops only. Outer loop is a for loop and inner loop is also a for loop, or simply we can say that writing one for loop within the another for loop is called nested for loop. Writing one while loop within the another while loop is called nested while loop. One more important point, in this syntax, I am showing only 2 loops for easy understanding. You can write 3 loops also. Okay, one outer loop, inner loop. Within that you can write one more loop also. That is also called nested looping concept. See the code. With help of this code, the concept will be clear to you. See the first example. Here we are implementing nested for loops. 2 for loops we are using, outer for loop and inner for loop. Now see, first we are creating 2 lists. One list name is adjectives and the second list name is fruits. For X in adjectives, outer loop and indentation, one indentation. So 9th statement is within the outer loop. Inner loop is for Y in fruits. This is the inner loop. And coming to the 10th statement, we have 2 indentations. It means the print statement is within the inner for loop. And coming to the 11th statement, here we have only one indentation. It means it is out of the inner for loop, nothing but within the outer for loop. Now see the logic. In the outer loop, the first element will be stored in the X in the first iteration. And coming to the inner loop, first element of the fruits will be stored in the inner loop variable, that is Y. Now I want to print X comma Y. The result of this statement is, in the first iteration, small, X value is small and Y value is orange, small orange. Clear? We know that already. Observe the inner for loop. Only first element was stored in the Y. So in the second iteration, again 9th statement will be executed. In that case, apple will be stored in the variable Y because that is the second element. And XY will be printed, nothing but small apple. Again, inner for loop will be executed. Third element will be stored in the inner for loop variable Y. XY will be printed, small banana. All the elements are processed. So no more elements in the inner for loop. So inner for loop will be terminated. It comes to the 11th statement. 11th statement is a part of the outer for loop. So again it reaches to the outer for loop. So this is second iteration. So tasty will be stored in the outer for loop variable X. Now it again enters into the 9th statement, that is inner for loop. Very important point. Here again the inner for loop execution starts from the reading the elements from first element. So first element will be read and stored in the variable Y. Print X comma Y. In this case, X value is tasty and Y value is orange. So tasty orange will be printed. And in the second iteration of the inner for loop, tasty apple will be printed. Third iteration of the inner for loop, tasty banana will be printed, and it comes out from the inner for loop because there are no elements in the fruits. It comes to the 11th statement, a new line is created. Coming to the outer for loop, in the adjectives list also, all the elements are read already. So no elements in the adjectives also. So the program will be terminated. So finally you must understand, for each and every element of the outer for loop, the inner for loop will be executed 3 times. For the first element, the inner for loop will be executed 3 times, and for the second element of the outer for loop, the inner for loop will be executed 3 times. So completely the inner for loop has 6 iterations. Now run the program. See the output: small orange, small apple, small banana. This is first 3 iterations with the first element of the outer loop, and with the second element of the outer loop, 3 iterations of the inner loop: tasty orange, tasty apple, tasty banana. So this is the execution procedure of nested looping concept. In this we are implementing nested for loops. See one more example. As we covered, nested looping concept is used to print the stars. In this example, we want to print the stars in right angled triangular form. Here we are using 2 for loops again, outer for loop and inner for loop. Here outer for loop we are using to represent the rows, number of the rows, and in the inner for loop we are using to represent number of the columns and number of the stars also. We want to print right angled triangle with stars like this. So first I is used to indicate rows. How many rows we have? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So with help of the range 1, 6 also, 5 elements will be generated, 1 to 5. Already we covered about the range. And how many columns we have? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 columns. So inner for loop is used to represent number of the columns or number of the stars to be printed in a particular row. So 1 comma, so J is used to represent number of the stars to be printed in a particular row. In the first row only 1 star, in the second row 2 stars, third row 3 stars and so on. That's why you must understand here we are using J to represent number of the stars, that is equals to that row number. Now see I in range 1 comma 6. With help of the range 1 comma 6, the elements generated are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. In the first iteration 1 will be stored in the variable I. Coming to the inner for loop, range 1 comma I plus 1, where I value is 1. So 1 comma 2, range 1 comma 2, it generates the values 1 only, because 2 is top value, only 1. So that one will be stored in the variable J. Print star, star will be printed. That's it. Inner loop will be executed only one time, right? Because there are no further elements to read. Because with help of the inner for loop, only one element is generated, that is only 1. So it comes to the 8th statement and it is a part of the outer loop. So a new line is created and it comes to the 5th statement again. Second element of the range 1 comma 6 is 2. So 2 will be stored in the variable I. And coming to the inner loop, 1 comma I plus 1, 2 plus 1, that is 3, 1 comma 3. Range 1 comma 3 is used to generate the numbers 1 comma 2. Inner for loop will be executed 2 times. Star will be printed first time, right? And a space is created. That's why we are writing end assignment space. After printing this star, a space is created and it redirects to the inner for loop again in the second iteration, and the second element, that is 2, will be stored in the variable J, and again the star will be printed. Okay, empty space is created and 2 elements are completed in the inner loop. There are no further elements to read. So it comes out from the inner loop. Again a new line is created and a third iteration of the outer loop will be started. Like this, in the third iteration 3 stars will be printed because inner for loop generates 3 numbers, and in the fourth iteration inner for loop generates 4 numbers. That's why 4 stars will be printed. In the fifth iteration inner for loop will generate 5 numbers. That's why it executes 5 times and 5 stars will be printed. Try to understand this logic. If you are not able to understand, try to watch multiple times. Still, if you have any doubts, mention in the comment box. See one more example. I want to print numbers in right angled triangular form. Same logic, but in the place of the stars, I want to print the numbers like 1 in the first row, 1, 2 in the second row, in the third row 1, 2, 3, fourth row 1, 2, 3, 4 and fifth row 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So if you compare the logic, everything is same except in the fifth statement. Instead of printing the star, I want to print J value. And one more important point, as of now we implemented nested for loop only, but we can implement nested while also, as we covered. Now see, here we are using 2 while loops. I want to print the numbers in this form 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3 in the 5 rows and 3 columns. Here I am using outer while loop to indicate number of the rows, and we are using inner while loop to indicate number of the columns. Number of the rows is 5. That's why we are framing the condition like less than or equals to 5. Number of the columns are 3. That's why we are framing the condition like less than or equals to 3, and we must initialize row variable I with 1, column variable J with 1. So within the inner for loop, just I want to print the J value. Here we are using F string concept. Already we covered F strings concept in our playlist. Just watch that if you haven't watched that F string concept. Already we covered while loop and nested loop concept clearly. So please trace this. Then one more important point, you can write for loop within the while loop within the for loop also. Observe this example. Here outer loop is for loop, inner loop is while. remaining logic is same. Just instead of the outer while loop, I am using outer for loop. It gives same output. I think the concept is clear. Check your knowledge, what you learned from this video. What is nested loop? Execution procedure of nested loops. What is nested for loop? What is nested while loop? If this video is useful to you, please do subscribe the channel, watch the videos, like and share the videos. Thank you.